Welcome, friends. Tonight, we venture into something a bit more tranquil, the murky, shadowed realm of medieval England. A land of towering castles, feudal obligations, and bone-deep hardship. This wasn't the England of romantic tales or chivalrous knights in gleaming armor. This was the England of mud, disease, and backbreaking labor, a place where making it through another day was a quiet victory. So, before you settle in, perhaps take a moment to appreciate the video if you find value in what we explore here. And feel free to share in the comments where you're watching from and what hour finds you listening. It's always intriguing to discover who's joining us across the globe. Now, lower the lights, perhaps switch on a gentle fan for that subtle ambient sound, and let's begin tonight's exploration together. You wake to darkness, complete, suffocating darkness. There are no windows in your corner of the hut, just wattle and daub walls that barely keep out the winter wind. The first sound you hear is the grunting of pigs from the other side of the room. Yes, you share your living space with livestock. It keeps everyone warmer, they say. It also keeps everything smelling like manure and wet straw. Welcome to your medieval dwelling. It's not a house in any modern sense. It's a single-room structure with a dirt floor, a thatched roof that leaks when it rains, and a central fire pit that fills the space with smoke because there's no proper chimney. Your bed is a pile of straw covered with rough cloth. You share it with your spouse, your children, possibly your elderly parents, and occasionally a wandering rat looking for warmth. The ceiling is low. Stand up too quickly, and you'll crack your skull on the wooden beams. The walls are thin. You can hear your neighbors' arguments, their prayers, and their persistent coughing through the night. Privacy is a luxury that doesn't exist here. There's no bathroom. That wooden bucket in the corner serves every bodily function. When it's full, you empty it into the street or the nearest ditch. The smell is permanent, layered into the very fabric of daily existence. You've learned to breathe shallowly indoors. It reduces the nausea somewhat. The door, such as it is, hangs crooked on leather hinges. It doesn't lock. There's nothing worth stealing anyway. A few wooden bowls, some tools, perhaps a cooking pot if you're fortunate. Your entire worldly possessions could fit in a single sack. And yet, this hovel is home. You know which corner stays driest during storms. You know where the floor is least uneven. You've memorized the particular way the thatch rustles when strong winds approach. It's familiar, if not comfortable, but don't mistake familiarity for safety. This structure offers shelter, barely, and prepares you for what waits beyond. Because the world outside these walls is no gentler. And believe me, the day ahead will test you further. You push open the creaking door and step outside, still rubbing sleep from your eyes and clutching a heel of stale bread. Immediately, you're engulfed by thick fog. But this isn't the mystical mist of legends. No, this is medieval England's signature atmosphere. A dense, damp blanket that smells of smoke, animals, and human waste. The sky is gray. The ground is gray. The very air seems gray. This fog isn't merely weather. It's a health hazard, created by wood smoke from thousands of hearths and the natural moisture that clings to this island. It seeps into your lungs and coats your throat. Everyone coughs. It's as common as breathing. Children wheeze like ancient bellows. Elderly folk hack with such force it sounds like their lungs might escape. The smell is a complex blend, with smoke, horse droppings, pig waste, and yesterday's discarded cabbage water. And it permeates everything. Your hair, your bread, your only good tunic. Nobody finds it unusual. People navigate their days blindly, literally. Candles burn throughout daylight hours and still provide insufficient illumination. At night, it grows even thicker. The fog creeps through every gap in your walls. And if you don't maintain a flame burning, you might walk directly into your fire pit. So yes, the air in medieval England doesn't just make breathing difficult. It marks you, preserves you in smoke, and challenges you to continue inhaling. You've emerged from bed, escaped your smoke-filled dwelling, and descended into the day's gray beginning.
Now your stomach protests. Time for breakfast. Except breakfast in medieval England isn't a meal so much as an exercise in managing expectations. If you're among the peasant class, which you almost certainly are, breakfast isn't eggs, or bread with butter, or a hearty bowl of porridge. It's a crust of bread that could serve as a weapon if necessary. Perhaps some pottage if the grain hasn't been consumed by mice in the storage barrel. And ale. Always ale. Not because it's enjoyable, but because it's been boiled.
And anything that's been boiled probably won't immediately poison you. Milk only if you're able to afford it, and even then, it's a risk. It might be diluted with water or worse, kept far too long by enterprising vendors who believe freshness is merely a suggestion. Sugar is expensive. Butter, essentially mythical. Jam exists only if your aunt passed away and bequeathed you some in her estate. If you're fortunate enough to labor in a manor house or live near a bakery, you might catch the aroma of warm bread on the breeze. Don't get your hopes elevated. That's not your bread. That's someone else's breakfast, likely belonging to a man with a title and land to his name. And if you're truly unfortunate, an orphan, a widow without means, or simply someone whose livelihood vanished to changing times, you might find yourself queuing at a monastery for a ladle of grayish gruel. It's warm. It's technically edible. That's approximately the kindest description one can offer. Street vendors might offer fried roots or questionable meat pastries. But be cautious. The meat is unidentifiable, the fat is ancient, and the probability of digestive regret is substantial. Still, the aroma is oddly appealing. When you're starving, everything smells like hope. You eat quickly, standing, wrapped in your cloak like a shield against reality. There's no dining hall, no pleasant morning hymns, just cold fog, clattering wheels, and the distant sound of someone already arguing about stolen firewood. And now, bellies only partially filled and spirits not remotely lifted, it's time to step into the real challenge. The streets of medieval England. Welcome to the streets of medieval England, a sprawling, chaotic network pulsing with mud, animals, and hardship. Every step you take is a calculated gamble. First things first, there are no sidewalks. The main road is a muddy battlefield of hoofbeats, wagon wheels, and ankle-deep muck. Horse-drawn carts barrel past at alarming speeds. One misstep, and you're face down in a puddle that smells like something expired in it. The gutters run down the middle, carrying all the village's discarded glory. Rotting vegetables, deceased rats, wood ash, chamber pot contents hurled from windows. Crossing them without slipping requires extraordinary balance. But it's not just the terrain, it's the people. Street children darting around, thieves brushing against your cloak, and vendors shouting about eels, fish, or something vaguely called meat. The air, still thick with smoke, now flavored with horse manure. If it rains, the streets transform into rivers of filth. Nobody offers shelter. You just pull your cloak tighter and trudge through it. And this is just your commute. You've navigated the sewers masquerading as streets, dodged horses and hooligans, and now it's time to earn your living, if fate permits it. In medieval England, labor isn't a title. It's a test of endurance, a way to slowly deteriorate while clinging to the illusion of stability. If you're a man, you might be fortunate enough to secure work in a field, 12 to 16 hours daily, 6 days weekly, for wages that wouldn't feed a well-behaved cat. The toil is backbreaking. The air is full of dust, chaff, and regret. If you injure your back permanently, don't worry. There are 20 children lined up behind you, ready to take your position. Don't fancy field work? Try stonemasonry, or hauling timber, or laboring in the mills, where your back gives out by 30 and your teeth fall out by 40, if you live that long. Women, you're scrubbing floors, washing other people's garments until your hands dissolve, sewing repairs until you forget what daylight looks like, all for pennies. And when those options run out, there's always begging. No sick leave, no safety, and no sympathy.
Maybe you're a chimney sweep or a night soil collector, digging through waste looking for anything remotely sellable. The smell is complimentary, the dysentery also included. Or perhaps you've landed in a monastery, that magical institution where the destitute are helped by being worked to the bone, in exchange for food so bland it feels like punishment. You're not here to thrive. You're here to not perish too loudly. Jobs come and go daily. Illness never does. Injury means starvation. There's no compensation, no insurance, no complaint department, just a foreman yelling at you to lift faster and breathe quieter. And heaven forbid you complain. There's always someone more desperate behind you, willing to work for less. Competition is fierce, and compassion is scarce. In medieval England, labor doesn't pull you from poverty. It gives you something to do while you're in it. In medieval England, childhood isn't a time of innocence. It's a brief window before your back gives out and your lungs fill with smoke. If you're small enough to fit inside a chimney, congratulations, you're considered employable. Forget toys and bedtime stories.
By the time you're 5, you're already working. 6, if your parents are merciful. School is a luxury. Labor is your future and your present. You might be a chimney sweep, crawling through narrow flues, scraping out soot while praying you don't get stuck. If you scream, they'll poke you with a stick. If you stop moving, they'll assume the worst and continue anyway. Or perhaps you're helping in the fields, small hands perfect for weeding between crops or scaring birds from the harvest. The pay? A meal, maybe. The hazard? Everything. Some children are apprentices, learning trades under masters who may or may not be kind. You work long hours, sleep in the shop, and hope your master doesn't beat you too severely for mistakes. Others hawk goods on the street, shout about fresh fish they can't afford, or run messages for pennies. You run fast, dodge traffic, and hope today isn't the day you're trampled by a horse or beaten for looking the wrong way at the wrong person. And if you're an orphan, the world doesn't owe you anything. Monasteries, the street, or worse. Some are sold into service, others vanish, absorbed into the fog, a footnote in someone else's story. In the eyes of medieval society, children are cheap, obedient, and disposable. Childhood isn't stolen, it's simply never offered. And yet somehow they survive. They play with sticks, sing songs in alleys, and laugh between shifts, because they have to. Because in England, even children carry the weight of survival on their tiny shoulders. If you thought surviving medieval England was hard as a man, try doing it as a woman. You work constantly. And no, you don't get applause or recognition. You get calluses, exhaustion, and a society that expects you to smile while your spine collapses. If you're unmarried, you might be a domestic servant. That means scrubbing floors from dawn till dusk, hauling buckets of water, tending the hearth, spinning wool until your arms ache, and never sitting down unless someone permits you to. You eat last, you sleep in the coldest corner, and if the master gets inappropriate, well, you should feel grateful, apparently. Married? That's not better. It's double duty. You clean your own hovel, likely a single filthy room, raise children, usually several, cook with nothing, sew everything, and manage the entire household budget with 3 pennies and a prayer. And then maybe you take in spinning from wealthier households, carding, spinning, weaving, repeating, just to buy bread. Some women become seamstresses, stitching garments in poorly lit corners for 14 hours daily. It pays pennies, it ruins your eyesight, and if your fingers bleed on the fabric, you lose the job. When none of that pays enough, or when you're widowed, orphaned, or just unlucky, the street becomes the only option. The oldest profession is always available, unofficially tolerated, and socially condemned. You might make enough for food and rent, or you might get arrested, attacked, or worse. Women in medieval England are expected to be quiet, clean, obedient, and always busy. You're the moral center of the home, even if the home has no floorboards, no heat, and no future. There are no rights,
No maternity leave, no safety net. Just other women, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, trying to survive the same nightmare. But somehow they do, with grim determination, whispered jokes, and backs bent by centuries of unpaid labor. And still they find time to comfort their children and sweep the doorstep because someone has to. You might have dodged the horses, survived the smoke, and even secured labor. But in medieval England, you can't dodge disease. It's everywhere, lurking in the water, the walls, the air, and quite possibly in the meat pie you ate for lunch. Illness doesn't knock. It sits beside you in church, sleeps beside you in your hovel, and sneaks into your lungs while you wait in line for bread. Let's start with the basics. Tuberculosis, or consumption as they called it, because it slowly consumes your lungs, your body, and your will to live. The cough is deep, constant, and comes with blood. Everyone knows someone who has it. Most people just keep working until they collapse. Then there's leprosy, which arrives slowly and takes everything. Your fingers, your face, your place in society. You're exiled to leper colonies, ringing bells to warn others of your approach. Plague appears periodically, wiping out entire villages. One day you feel fine, the next you're covered in swellings, fever takes you, and by week's end, you're in a mass grave. It spreads fast. Whole streets go silent. The church bells ring constantly for the dead. Dysentery, scarlet fever, smallpox, regular visitors. Each has its own personality, but they all share one thing in common. They hit the poor the hardest. If you can't afford a physician, and you can't, you're left with herbal remedies, homemade poultices, or the magical healing properties of prayer. Of course, there's always bloodletting, a beloved medical technique where they drain your blood to balance your humors. You've got a fever? Bleed you. Cramps? Bleed you. Grieving the death of your 8th child? Definitely bleed you. You'll still die, but you'll die very pale. And what about the physicians? Well, they mean well, sometimes, but medicine is still guessing with Latin. Leeches are fashionable. Surgery is done without washing hands. Your odds with a village wise woman aren't much worse. Disease doesn't discriminate, but your living conditions help it choose you faster. No sanitation, no ventilation, 10 people to a room. It's a perfect breeding ground for microbes, misery, and mold. In medieval England, if something doesn't kill you fast, it will kill you slowly. And if you're somehow still upright, time to refill your cup. You're sweating through your soot-stained tunic, your lips are dry, and your throat feels like it's been scraped by coal dust. Time for a drink? Sure. But in medieval England, water isn't your friend. It's a gamble with potentially fatal consequences. Let's start with the river, the lifeblood of the community. It's also the toilet, the industrial dump, the animal graveyard, and just for good measure, the town's main water source. Imagine a stew of rotting vegetables, tannery runoff, deceased dogs, human waste, and expired fish flowing right past the village. Now, pour a cup and say cheers. Don't worry, they say it's fine if you draw from upstream. That means it's passed through gravel, wishful thinking, and possibly someone's old boot. If you live in a village, your water might come from a communal well down the lane, which you share with 200 neighbors and 3 nearby workshops. And the worst part? You might not even know it's deadly until it's too late. Cholera loves bad water. So does typhoid. They swim freely through the supply like microscopic predators. Whole families are taken out within days. A shared bucket, a misused chamber pot, a splash from the wrong well, and you're a cautionary tale, if you're lucky. Bathing? Now that's adorable. Most people don't have bathtubs. If you're wealthy, you might share one with the family once monthly. If you're poor, it's a wooden basin in the dwelling once every few months, if that. And that same water might double as laundry rinse, dishwater, or a place to soak your aching feet. Hygiene is creative.
Eventually, some towns start building better wells, thanks to wealthy benefactors who've noticed the smell. Until then, you boil your water when you can, or drink ale, the safe medieval beverage for children and adults alike. Weak, warm, and slightly fizzy with salvation. So yes, in medieval England, you can die from a cup of water. The trick isn't just avoiding thirst, it's avoiding where the thirst takes you. You've tried honest work. It's long, filthy, and barely pays enough to buy yesterday's bread. The water might kill you. The labor definitely will. And the tax collector doesn't accept excuses. So what's left? Crime. And in medieval England, it's not just an act. It's a survival strategy. Start small. Maybe you're a pickpocket or a cut purse, as the slang goes. You blend into crowds near the markets, bump someone gently, and vanish with a coin purse or bread loaf. There were no romantic tales about it. You got sent to the stocks, or worse, hanged. If you're a woman, you might become a receiver, buying and reselling stolen goods in back alleys under layers of shawls and misdirection. Or maybe you run a safe house where thieves drop their loot before the watchman comes sniffing. Feeling bold? Become a market swindler, selling spoiled fruit or watered-down ale from a rickety cart, disappearing before complaints catch up. Or try your hand at forgery, dice games, or the always popular shell game, a fast-talking scam with a faster getaway. And if you've really got courage, there's always burglary. Break into a storehouse, a merchant shop, or if you're desperate, a church. You might find something valuable. You might also find a watchman with a club and no bedtime. The watch exists, but they're underpaid, undermanned, and often 2 steps behind. Plus, you can bribe the right officer if you know the system. And let's face it, you probably do. Crime networks in England were surprisingly organized. Some had territories, code words, and full recruitment pipelines. Of course, the consequences are real. Get caught and you could be flogged, branded, jailed, or worse, executed. But if the alternative is starving on a cold street, well, risk has a certain appeal. Because in medieval England, morality comes second to hunger. Crime isn't the opposite of work. It is work. And for many, it's the only employment that hires. Let's say you've caught something. A cough, a fever, maybe your leg's been crushed by a delivery cart. Time to see a physician. Good luck.
Because in medieval England, medicine is less healing science and more creative improvisation with sharp implements. Physicians exist, sure. Some even wear robes. But unless you're wealthy, your first stop isn't a physician. It's a herbalist, where the cure for every ailment is a strange-smelling poultice or a bitter tea. It won't cure you, but you'll stop noticing. Can't afford an herbalist? Maybe there's a barber surgeon down the road. Yes, a man who cuts hair and also amputates limbs. If your wound is infected, he'll saw it off. No anesthesia, no antiseptic, just a stick to bite and a bucket to scream into. And don't even think about hospitals. They're overcrowded, poorly ventilated, and smell like old bandages and lost hope. The instruments aren't cleaned. Surgeons wipe their hands on aprons between patients. Disease theory exists, but many still think illness is caused by bad air and moral failure. If you survive the treatment, infection may finish the job. A splinter can become a death sentence. A toothache? That's 2 days from blood poisoning. And childbirth? Well, women go in with pain and come out with a baby or a gravestone, sometimes both. Medical texts are filled with confidence and wrong guesses. You might be prescribed bleeding, mustard plasters, or prayer to balance the humors. They balance the body by draining it, mostly of blood, money, and hope. There are a few progressive physicians with new ideas. Cleanliness, careful observation, maybe even proper diagnosis. But they're usually mocked by their peers. After all, how dare anyone imply that a learned physician's methods carry risk? So, what do most people do when sick? They wait. They sip herbal tea. They light a candle and lie very still. Because every treatment carries a risk, and recovery often feels more accidental than intentional. You don't go to the physician to get better. You go because you've run out of other options. And sometimes, just sometimes, you come back out alive. The sun sets, the torches flicker to life, and the fog thickens like a burial shroud. You might think the village calms down at night, but this is medieval England. When the light fades, the real dangers emerge. Forget cozy firesides and quiet evenings. The streets belong to shadows, and they're not empty. The torchlight barely cuts through the mist. Everything is a silhouette. A hunched figure in the alley, a cloaked shape behind a wall, footsteps that echo one beat too many. If you're out alone, you're either lost or you've run out of better options. The watchmen patrol in pairs, swinging their staffs and trying to look menacing, but even they know certain alleys are best left alone. Criminals own the night, and most wear shoes softer than a watchman's boots. Robbers, cutthroats, and thieves thrive after dark. And if your route takes you through the rougher quarters, you hold your breath and walk faster. Not because of ghosts, though the fog does play tricks, but because someone might be watching, and they might have a blade. If you're a woman, the danger triples. Men leer from corners. Offers are whispered. Some follow. Others don't bother whispering. The darkness hides everything. Faces, screams, and sometimes bodies. Even if you stay indoors, you're not always safe. Hovels creak and groan. Rats scratch behind walls. Arguments erupt 2 dwellings down and end with breaking pottery or breaking bones. Sometimes someone vanishes, and no one asks why. And let's not forget the fires. Hearths spark, oil lamps tip, a knocked-over candle ignites a sleeping mat. No alarms, no brigade that arrives in minutes. Just neighbors shouting and throwing buckets into a blaze they can't control. If you must venture out, you carry a lantern and hope the flame doesn't blow out in the wind, or worse, draw attention. Because in medieval England, night isn't rest, it's risk. The poor don't sleep peacefully. They sleep light, one eye open, one ear tuned to the creak of floorboards. And for many, morning is just something to survive to. The morning arrives, or at least you assume it does, because in medieval England, light isn't so much seen as guessed at through the thick, suffocating smoke. It rolls in like a living thing, a gray, greasy mist made of wood smoke, fog, hearth ash, and the weary sighs of 1,000 overworked fires. It wraps around structures, slinks into cracks, and settles in your lungs like a tenant who refuses to leave. You cough again. You never really stopped. The smoke irritates your throat, clings to your skin, and makes your eyelashes feel sticky. Everyone coughs. It's part of the daily soundtrack along with the church bells, the clop of hooves, and someone yelling about turnips. You wipe the walls. The cloth comes away black. You wash your hands. The water turns gray. Your clothes, no matter how often they're scrubbed, always smell faintly of smoke and despair. Even your blankets are stained with soot.
They hang heavy and stiff, like they've witnessed too much. You think about opening the door. Then you remember what's outside. More smoke, more filth, and the smell of 12 hearth fires fighting for dominance. The worst of it? This is normal. Villagers live in a permanent twilight. The sun is a rumor. People squint to see. Children grow pale. Plants on window ledges die of asphyxiation. During the worst smoke events, the air becomes so dense that you can't see your own feet. People get lost walking home. Carts crash. Animals wander into walls. The poor, of course, get it worse. Their fires burn cheap, damp wood. Their walls are thin. Their lungs weaker. Children wheeze through winter like old dogs.
If you reach adulthood without persistent cough, mysterious blackened phlegm, or chronic breathlessness, you're a miracle. And yet you go on. You light the fire. You step outside. You pretend not to taste the air. Because in medieval England, the smoke never ends. It just waits for you. You'd be forgiven for thinking medieval England was all smoke, sickness, and screaming. And mostly you'd be right. But even in the dirtiest corners, under the weight of poverty and fog, something human still flickers. Because kindness, oddly enough, survives here too. Though you often have to squint to see it. You might spot it in the shared loaf of bread passed quietly between neighbors when one family runs out before market day. Or in the woman who gives her last coin to a barefoot child with bloodied feet. There's no reward, just a nod and maybe a smile, rare and precious. Even in the darkest places, the hovels, the alleys, the monasteries, people look out for each other. Not always, not perfectly, but often enough to prove that the world hasn't broken them completely. A mother shares her warm stone on a freezing night. A chimney sweep helps a new boy not get stuck on his first climb. A dying man gives his boots to someone who still has the strength to work. These aren't grand gestures. They're small, quiet, but they matter more than gold in a place where hope is a rationed luxury. The taverns help too. They're loud, smelly, overcrowded, and absolutely essential. It's where people gather to sing, to joke, to drink away their bruises and their sorrow. You might not afford meat, but you can share a laugh over watery ale. Even the street performers, the ballad sellers, the blind fiddler at the corner, they all form a kind of patchwork comfort, reminders that not everything in the world is out to hurt you. Kindness here isn't naive, it's practical. It's born of shared suffering. Because when the system forgets you, when the wealthy pretend you don't exist, your only safety net is each other. And so, despite everything, the filth, the fever, the fog, people still love, still marry, still raise children, still hope. Because if you can find kindness in the gutter, a warm hand in the cold, a crust of bread, a half-hummed lullaby, then maybe the world hasn't won. Not yet. So, after countless paragraphs of choking smoke, rats in the walls, toxic water, and physicians prescribing bloodletting for broken legs, ask yourself honestly, would you survive medieval England? Probably not. Let's be clear, this wasn't a world built for comfort. It was built on feudalism, sweat, and the crushed spines of the working poor. Every day was a battle against hunger, against disease, against landlords, bailiffs, watchmen, and the constant creeping sense that the world had forgotten you. Modern luxuries didn't exist. Soap, antibiotics, light switches, none of it. There were no social safety nets, no universal health care, no days off. Just another smoke-choked morning where your goal was simple. Don't die before supper. You'd miss things like toilets, toothpaste, tap water that doesn't try to kill you. You'd wonder why everyone stares at you for brushing your teeth or asking about vegetables. You'd miss showers. Oh, you'd miss showers so much. And yet, people did survive. Somehow they endured. Not because they were superhuman, but because they had no other choice. They formed communities. They raised families. They organized rebellions, wrote poetry, played music on street corners, and clung to hope like it was the last piece of bread in the pantry. They laughed, yes, even in the fog. They found love in crowded hovels, sang lullabies over screaming children, and danced in taverns after 16-hour shifts. They weren't just victims. They were tough, resilient, and painfully human. You probably wouldn't last a day. And that's not an insult. it's a reminder. The people who did, they carried the weight of survival on their backs. Often barefoot, often hungry, and almost always ignored. They built the foundations of the world we now complain about in heated rooms with clean drinking water. So maybe it's okay that we wouldn't make it, but let's at least remember them. Not as smoke-covered statistics, but as people who survive the impossible every single day.
And with that, we close this chapter of history. Rest well, and may your sleep be far more comfortable than anything medieval England could ever offer.